Welcome to the CFL three-down breakdown. It is week 6 in the Canadian Football League. I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, joined by Andrew McGinnis, and we do have 4 games this week. Last week was just a weird week from the get-go. Only 3 games. There were lines that weren't really available right away. It was just an odd, bizarre week. Back to normal a little bit, I would say, here in week 6. Well, what do we know so far going into week 6? Well, we know Calgary is really, really good. We know Montreal's really, really bad. And they're really the two bookends here in the league, the best team and the worst team. And what we know about the other 7 teams is not a whole lot, other than they're consistently inconsistent. I mean, this is a really wide open league at this point in time. If you separate Calgary, the cream of the crop, and then that shit-tastic Montreal Alouettes team, you take those two out of the equation, and you've got a bunch of teams that one week look good and one week not so good. Your Ottawas, your Saskatchewans, your Edmontons, your Winnipegs, your BCs, your Hamiltons. I mean, everybody else, it seems, Toronto. Go on down the list. There is very little consistency. And right now, it's just one of those weird situations where you've got clearly one team that's great, one team that's horrible, and a whole lot of teams neck and neck in between. The other 7, you can pretty much lump them into a pot and stir them around because there's not really much difference between those 7 teams right now. What I know about those 7 teams, or have come to learn after 5 weeks of watching them, is that none of them are perfect. All right, they all have some kind of flaw. There's some kind of imperfect element to each of those 7 teams outside of Calgary, who we know are really, really good, who put it together consistently on both sides of the ball, and Montreal, who have not put it together on both sides of the football pretty much every week outside of the one game they won against Saskatchewan. So it's a very, very wide open league right now. I mean, no one's really separated themselves other than Calgary when you put it that way. And then, of course, you got Montreal. It's separated themselves in the other direction. So it's making for really a lumped up group of teams. Standings are tight, very compact right now. Nobody's really distinguished themselves. And we're going to have to monitor this as the season goes on to see if one of these teams has it in them to really get some footing going, get some consistency game to game, something that a lot of these teams have struggled with. And speaking of teams that have struggled with consistency, that's going to be 2 teams that kick off week 6 Thursday night football action, where finally country music will not be heard at halftime. Yes, here in Hamilton, we're going to have the Beaches performing at halftime. Rock music. What a music to my ears that is. I mean, we need to bury the country for a week. I know there's people that like country music, but enough already. It's time to get some other music to be played at halftime, and we'll finally have that Thursday night. Saskatchewan, Hamilton. I'll tell you what, I did not expect the line to be this high right now. We've got Hamilton here about minus 11, the total in this game, around the 50.5 mark currently at this point in time. It's an interesting game here because you've got 2 teams that are playing each other for the second straight time with a bye week sandwiched in between the 2 games. So that's the situation here. Saskatchewan really relied, and I mean totally relied, on defense and special teams to beat Hamilton 2 weeks ago. Their offense was putrid again. Brandon Bridge was terrible. David Watford was not better. To put this Saskatchewan offense and their miserable performance into some kind of light and some kind of context, how about the fact that the quarterback combination, Andrew, of Brandon Bridge and David Watford have 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions combined? That's not winning offensive football. I mean, that's not protecting the ball. That's not being able to make plays with it. And you are seeing that really from both guys right now. And Chris Jones has really driven his fans nuts. The organization nuts, the TSN analysts at halftime nuts have talked about it, how he's yanking these quarterbacks in and out of games back and forth, Watford to Bridge, Bridge to Watford, Watford to Bridge, and back and forth like a roller coaster. And it looks like he's prepared to do the same thing again this week. Yes, Bridge is going to start, but he hasn't hid the fact that if Bridge struggles early, they're going to put Watford in. And this is totally asinine, this philosophy, because neither quarterback can get any sort of rhythm, any sort of chemistry, can have any sort of comfort, or feel like, oh, we can't even make one bad throw, or we might be not pulled out of this football game. It's a very uncomfortable spot for both of these quarterbacks to be in here. Hamilton off the bye. They talked about it going into the Winnipeg game, Andrew, that they played at home. that they wanted to make Tim Hortons Field a tough place to play again. They were a disastrous team at home last season, horrible home record. Well, they got off to a good home start this season. They pummeled Winnipeg that first home game. This is only their second home game of the season here for the Ticats. I want no part of Saskatchewan here. None. Zero. I don't trust their offense on the road. The only game they've played on the road so far was that whitewash that they suffered at the hands of Ottawa, which is not really all that good when you look at what Ottawa's done since then. 40-17, Saskatchewan got drilled on the road. That being said, this is not the price range I was hoping to get Hamilton in. I would have Hamilton circled. I like the spot. I like the revenge situation. I don't trust Saskatchewan on the road. I trust their offense and their quarterbacks even less on the road, but I am not ready to lay double digits. So it's a pass for me on this game. Totals wise, I don't know how you can bet a Saskatchewan game over the total right now until that offense shows you something. So I'd lean under the total, but right now it's looking like a game I'll be there as a fan watching and cheering the Ticats, not so much an predominant heavy big-time betting action kind of game for me. Andrew, Saskatchewan-Hamilton to kick off Thursday night, Week 6 action. What do you like here in this game?
Yeah, Ian, just to really kind of agree with you real quick about this entire season in a whole, there's been really only a certain amount of consistency we can really say that we've had, and it's kind of part of the grind right now. 5-5 is our best bet record, and I mean, looking at that record and looking at the inconsistency we've seen throughout this entire season. I mean, like you mentioned, the only thing we dominantly know is that Montreal is going to be at the bottom, and Calgary is kind of way above everybody else right now. And they showed that versus Ottawa and had a huge performance. But coming into this game, I mean, I agree with the same thing that you're saying, Ian. There's not enough security. There's not enough confidence with the Saskatchewan Roughriders team. I mean, I think the most inconsistent team in this league right now might be the Roughriders, specifically because their quarterback situation. They got Carter going from defense to offense, back to defense again. Their O line is shaky. It's just unacceptable for a team. And so when I look at this game, I agree with you. I did not want to see the minus 11, minus 10.5 number. So what I will do is look at the under in this one. I mean, we're seeing a lot of totals that are pretty low this week, but 51.5 at Pinnacle, minus 104. Cannot argue with that. I do not think Saskatchewan will be able to hold too much over their heads in this game, and I think that Hamilton. One thing I believe that they have to get better at still is their defense. Masoli will put up points for you, but you have to sharpen things up. And second game at home, I think this is the time they do it. So I'll go under 51.5 at this play.
Yeah, 3 games and 3 unders last week. Just continuing trend, lower scoring football and ugly football at times, especially on the offensive side. All 3 games stayed under the total last week. Ottawa, Calgary, Toronto, Edmonton, and Winnipeg, BC. Well under the total. I don't think anyone even came close to sniffing an over last week in those 3 football games. Now, eventually, there's going to be a reversal, a regression to the mean, so to speak. But I'm done trying to bang my head against the wall with overs until I see some legitimate correction. And until then, I'm a little reluctant. I'm a little gun shy, and that's why I'll probably be more on the sides this week than totals. Because eventually, the worm's going to turn. I mean, if we have another 3-1 under or 4-0 under week this week, those totals are going to be lowered even more going into week 7 next week. So there's going to be eventually a buy low point for people looking to go the other way and bet these games over the total. It's just a question of when is it going to hit that buy low point. Have we hit it this week, or are we maybe 1 week away from that? Because it is a little bit lower, these totals across the board, but you're still seeing games end in the 30s. You're still seeing games end in the low to mid 40s, and I'm not sure that the adjustments that we're seeing with the totals going into week 6 here have been enough. We're going to find out, but this is one game I don't want over the total because again, Saskatchewan, their offense is to me in shambles. Their offensive line continues to struggle. Pass protection's a big-time issue. Run blocking's a big-time issue. I was reading some things that Saskatchewan had to stop practice the other day because of sloppy play, teammates jaw-jacking at one another, people dropping passes, some ugly reports about some sloppy, poor performances from Saskatchewan in practice leading up to this game. And Chris Jones apparently lit into his team during one of these practices a couple of days ago saying, hey, there's a reason why we're 2-2. There's a reason why our offense stinks. We're not we're not practicing well enough. We're not sharp well enough in practice for these games. And our buddy Morency, Andrew, we know him well. One of the things he loves saying all the time is proper preparation prevents poor performance. Well, it doesn't sound like Saskatchewan's getting proper preparation right now if you're reading these practice reports going into this football game. So to me, it's Hamilton or pass. But again, it's a number that I make a power rating. I make my own line on every CFL game. My number had this 7.5 on Hamilton. So that tells you right
Yeah, I
there.
did
There's
not
no
have
way I can
11.
get to the. Yeah, I did not have
Yeah.
nobody did. So I think it's inflated because of Saskatchewan's issues. Everybody knows this, and they were drilled in the one road game. I think there's something to it. Something to it with that. Remember, they only played one road game this year. It was against Ottawa, and it was non-competitive. They lose 40-17 in that game, and hey, Hamilton won their only previous home game by 14 against a team that I think is better than Saskatchewan, and that's Winnipeg. So they could get there. They could cover this number. It wouldn't shock me if they do, but it's just not the value I was hoping for here on the Ticats side. Let's go to Friday night. We've got BC taking on Ottawa, second game of the Week 6 slate. We've got Ottawa laying 6.5 points here in this football game against the BC Lions, who go on the road following an improbable comeback victory last week against the Winnipeg Blue. I'll be honest, I was shocked by it. Shocked by it to see what the BC Lions were able to come up with. But at the same point in time, there was a legitimate boost in energy. There's a legitimate boost in intensity from this football team and a rally the troops kind of mentality for Travis Lulay, which is kind of what I thought might happen going into that game. I mean, he's very well liked. He's a veteran guy. A lot of these players on this BC Lions team have been with Lulay now for a very long time, and they basically said, "Let's win one for this guy. We want to give it our all." Lulay had the predictable slow start. He hasn't played in almost a year, for crying out loud. So obviously, he had a tough first quarter. Really struggled for most of the first half. Bad interception, bad decision early in the game. He was forcing something, interception, throwing the ball to the back of the end zone, and it was intercepted. That snuffed out a BC drive early in that game. But really after that, I mean, Lulay after halftime really started to settle in. Most of the BC damage was through the air. They didn't really run the football with any sort of success. But boy, was Travis Lulay in the zone once that second half rolled around. He ended up with over 300 yards passing, found all his targets. Brian Burnham had a really nice second half for him as well, down the field receiving the ball for BC. And it was a tremendous comeback. And they were left for dead. Winnipeg was up 17-0 in that game. And where did that BC defense come from? BC defense that had been picked apart, the last couple of weeks against Edmonton and Winnipeg. And even in the first half, Winnipeg had a lot of success moving the ball. And in the second half, they pitch a shutout. All of a sudden, that secondary starts making plays, that young BC secondary, maybe growing up a little bit. And that pass rush finally starts to wreak havoc on Matt Nichols. There's not many games you can say Matt Nichols, you force him into no touchdowns and 3 interceptions in a football game. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Matt Nichols has been so good not throwing interceptions and protecting the ball. And he has 3 interceptions last week at the hands of that BC defense. So got to give the Lions credit for that, no question. Now, can they do it on the road? That's going to be the question. They beat Montreal at home, they beat Winnipeg at home, but they also lost a bad one to Winnipeg on the road, lost a bad one to Edmonton on the road. So, is this team capable of traveling well? That's the question going into this game against Ottawa. Ottawa's now had, really 2 hideous performances against Calgary. Sandwiched in between was that win against Montreal, which isn't saying much. So what are you going to get from them? Offensively, they were just beyond bad last week. The offensive line struggled, couldn't run the ball. Trevor Harris was inaccurate all game long. This is definitely what you would think is not a must-win spot, but there's a premium now. You don't want to drop 2 home games in a row here if you're the Ottawa Red Blacks. You're at least taking a little bit of a step down in class here against BC. BC's not Calgary. Clearly, we know that. So I think this is a chance for Ottawa to maybe right the ship just a little bit. I don't trust BC just yet on the road. I know they're getting a lot of points here, but they got blown out in Winnipeg, blown out in Edmonton. I'm going to have to see what they do as they make the long trek here to Ottawa. And if I'm not mistaken, 0-2 straight up were the BC Lions head-to-head against Ottawa last season. They didn't particularly match up well with this team. And let's not forget, impact injury. You're going to want to make note of this. Solomon Elimimian out of this game for the BC Lions, one of the best linebackers in the CFL. Really is it a guy that can come up to the line of scrimmage and stop the run. You can drop him back in pass coverage, and he can do both at a very high level. He's not going to be on the field. He's almost like the signal caller, one of the leaders of that BC defense. Solomon Elimimian not going to play in this game. That could matter when it comes to BC's ability to contain what you would think is an Ottawa offense that's clearly disgusted with the way they played last week. It was as bad for an offense with the talent Ottawa has, with Harris and Ellingson and Sinopoli and a good running back and Powell. Shocked to see them be that inept, even against a good, and I know Calgary's defense has been spectacular, but that was still an inept performance from Ottawa. You would think they'll bounce back. I got to look toward laying the points here with Ottawa. I do. If it's less than 7, that's the way I'm going to go here. Ottawa minus the 6.5. I got to see it from BC on the road. They've laid 1 egg, 2 eggs, in fact, on the road against Winnipeg and Edmonton. Non-competitive blowout losses. I think it's a good situation for Ottawa. They got to make good on it, which I've still got some concern about. But especially without Elimimian, a huge comeback win at home against a division rival, a letdown factor potentially here for BC as well. We'll see. But if I'm playing, as Teddy Covers would say, I'm laying. Have to go with Ottawa here in this game. Andrew McGinnis, let's get to you on this one. Lions and the Red Blacks, Friday night football tonight. What do you like here in this game?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. You mentioned it already about the inconsistency, but I'll tell you, last week in my eyes, it was a very, kind of a mental week for these teams. I mean, look at BC and Winnipeg. You see, Winnipeg absolutely rocked BC the week before. I mean, they put up 41 points against them. And look, I got to give my hats off to BC. Like you said, they rallied around Lule. They ended up getting themselves together in the second half, pretty much forcing Winnipeg to do nothing. I mean, the first half was their half, and after that, BC just kind of slowly got out that win. But look at Edmonton again. It's a team that we're supposed to take seriously and supposed to have the best quarterback in the league, if not top 2. You got this Toronto team trying to kind of scrounge around for an identity, try and make a name for themselves, and they end up only losing by 1 point. That's this Edmonton team, which I think is a lot more elite. I mean, you got to say, like, these teams really play to the level of their opponent in the second week of these games, and that's honestly what you cannot do in sports. I mean, it's obviously a shameful thing that there's only so many teams and so many scheduling kind of ways you can schedule the season in the CFL. But for these teams to show up like they did, and looking at Ottawa, 27 to 3. I mean, that game was an absolute shit show, Ian, from the minute it started, man. Like I had a piece of the over and I had a piece of Calgary. And I honestly, looking at that, I had a feeling Calgary's going to be fresh off a bye. I thought Ottawa would come to play as the previous performance was not good. And then it ends up looking the way it did. I mean, like you mentioned, with the weapons that they have, with Trevor Harris at quarterback, that should not happen. So in summary, I really do think, I look at it and I think Ottawa's terrible loss for the second time against Calgary is a lot more meaningful than BC stepping it up and getting a really, really crappy win over Winnipeg. I mean, we can talk about Lule. We can talk about their defense. We can talk about interceptions. We can talk about getting it into Matt Nichols' head. But in my opinion, Ian, that game is kind of irrelevant now because it was more of a weakness on the mental aspect for Winnipeg than it really was for BC. And I really do believe that. I think that, as much as BC can build on that, I don't think that'll damage Winnipeg's, power rankings or how I feel about them. But one thing we know that's helping us with is, get a good spread off them, of course. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But yeah, look, Ottawa Red Blacks, their bounce back is a lot more important than I think that kind of false performance we saw from BC. So if I can get a minus 6.5 number with this Ottawa team, I'll take it for sure.
Yeah, and Ottawa again matched up well with BC last year. It's just, can BC withstand prosperity? And this is another team that they've yet to put back-to-back good efforts in a row together. So, and I know it's not Jennings now. That's the part that does worry me here about back in Ottawa. This is not Jennings anymore. This is Lule. It's a guy that clutched up in last week against Winnipeg, got the job done, made plays with the game on the line to help the team win, not help the team lose, which has been Jonathan Jennings' issue the last couple of years. But again, you're off that kind of huge comeback at home, last second field goal to win the game. It's a flat spot potentially as well. And I think Ottawa, just a complete shit show last week against Calgary. Everything went wrong for them. I think they really, if this team's worth their salt at all, it's a big time redemption spot for them here. We'll see if they can make good on it Friday night. Let's go to Saturday. 2 games to wrap up week 6, a doubleheader. One in the afternoon, one at night. We've got Winnipeg taking on Toronto. Winnipeg, it's right around pick 'em. Some spots have a pick. Some spots have Winnipeg -1. The total 50.5, 51 right now, depending on where you look here. And look, Matt Nichols, uh, you're not going to see him have a game with you're not going to see him throwing in one interception in a lot of games. You're not going to rarely ever see him throw 3 interceptions in one game, and that's what happened to him on Saturday night against the BC Lions. At a Winnipeg offense that was rolling early. If anything, they did, you know, red zone. I guess they got down there a few times. That game was 17-0. That game really could have been 21 or 28-0. They did miss out on a couple chances to really bury BC early, and then they'd stuck on 17 and they kept stopping BC in the first half. And it's like they came out at halftime saying we can just waltz on the field and win the football game. Because then it was just, the offense really, that urgency wasn't there. They weren't making plays. There were some drop passes, some bad pass protection. Nichols was under duress a lot. I remember there was one play when the game was tied before BC got the ball back in the fourth quarter. Matt Nichols was just crunched. I mean, he was absolutely crunched from both ends. The ball came out. Winnipeg was lucky to recover it. And it's like Winnipeg's offense went to sleep a little bit. Like, we got this game in the bag. We crushed this team the week before. We're up 17-0 on them again here the following week. We're just going to coast our way to a nice, easy, comfortable, don't really have to do much except scratch our head kind of win. That's not the way it works, though, sometimes. BC, give them credit, showed you a little fight back, and sure enough, took advantage, made some plays. The offense got rolling. Winnipeg's defensive inconsistency really reared its ugly head again, because really this team hasn't put together 4 quarters of good defense yet this season, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and it happened again second half against BC last week. But Matt Nichols said, unacceptable. He was throwing out those terms. I can't have games like that. I'll own this loss. He said it's on me fully, and I think that gets the respect of the locker room a lot, and the teammates when Matt Nichols takes really all the responsibility for that loss, when really it was a collective thing. Now, did he play awful in the second half? Yes. Did he make some bad decisions and interceptions that he rarely ever makes? Yes. But the defense didn't help him out either. It's a team loss. It's a team effort. But the fact Matt Nichols really does his best to try to own that loss, I think says a lot about him as a leader now on this team, as a quarterback. You watch this guy now go out there and against Toronto, and I have a feeling he's going to have not just a good game, he's going to have a big game here against this Toronto Argonauts team. We know this Winnipeg team for in terms of their skill position talent. How do you not love it? How do you not love Andrew Harris in your backfield? How do you not love Darvin Adams and Darius Bowman and Weston Dressler and Drew Wolotarski, who is an emerging young wide receiver? How do you not like this group of players and playmakers that Winnipeg has at their disposal? I think they're going to have a bounce back in them. I think they're going to have that urgency too. When we do score points, we're going to try to score more points. We can't get complacent. So for me, I'm going to go Winnipeg and the over, both in this game, side and total. This is the one over I do like this week. I don't like any other game to go over the total except this one. I think Winnipeg gets their offense going. They talked about, again, increasing the number of times they go up tempo as well heading into this game. James Franklin now, his third start in a row, second home start. I think he's going to be able to at least make some plays offensively. I think it was a little step backward for him and the Argos offense last week. It was a really ugly football game last week in Edmonton, but you would expect that. I mean, he's on the road for the first time this season. He's still trying to assert himself and grow into his role as the new starting quarterback. So I think that's going to come with time. But one thing we saw about Winnipeg's defense, they gave up some yards on the ground the last couple of weeks, and I think that's good news for Toronto and James Wilder Jr. in particular. I think they'll be able to run the football, keep James Franklin in some second down and manageable situations. And if you can give Franklin those kind of situations down and distance, it's going to make him a better quarterback. However, even though I think Toronto will get their offense going a bit better than it did last week, I do think Winnipeg will prevail. Winnipeg has dominated this series recently, 4-0 straight up, 3-1 straight up, rather, 4-0 against the spread last 4 meetings against Toronto, and the only Toronto win was by a single point. So it's been a tough matchup for the Argos. I like Winnipeg and a bounce back here off a crushing loss last week, and the game to go over 50.5, 51, depending on which book you bet that total at. Let's get to Andrew with the Blue Bombers and the Argos on Saturday. Andrew, what you got here?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about how I think, the Ottawa game was an absolute stomping from Calgary. Looking at this Toronto-Edmonton game from last week, like I said, this was kind of a snore fest. I mean, this was an absolutely atrocious game. The fact that we were trying to advertise, last week a lot for heading into the MLB All-Star break even relatively soon. We want to get people watching the CFL. This isn't what the CFL is. That game wasn't an extraordinary game. That's not the exciting CFL football we're used to seeing. And that's not really even the Mike Riley we're used to seeing with 2 TDs, 1 INT, and 21 for 36. It's not really his best performance. James Franklin, again, I mean, like you mentioned, Ian, there's only realistically, I don't care how old someone is. I don't care their development. You really need to see improvement every single game, and you really did say it there. I think it was a step back for him. But again, I've always talked about this with the Argos. I do think that what they have going for them is their ability to go to James Wilder Jr., their ability to go to S.J. Green, their ability to have Armonte Edwards, different guys down the depth chart to carry them. But it just seemed like James Franklin right now is not the guy. I mean, 26 for 36, 72%, but all those yards, but it amounts to nothing with no TDs and 1 INT. It's not really acceptable. So heading into this game, I have to agree. I mean, the fact is, I mean, I can't say this, we can't always say this, but with a team like Winnipeg, the fact is Matt Nichols threw 3 INTs, 3 interceptions from this guy that came out the week before and absolutely destroyed the exact same team we just lost by 3 to. So, I mean, show how much of a mental game it really is. But the fact that that's really, really helped the spread that we're getting now in this game versus the Argos. I mean, at a pick 'em, are you serious? I mean, it's just an overreaction in my eyes. So this should be an easy play here on the Winnipeg side. I won't really touch the under or over, Ian, strictly because I just don't know what we're going to get from Toronto. I don't know what style of game we're going to get from them, and I think I'd have to rely too much on Winnipeg to put up those points.
All right, so just the side for Andrew, and the fact that it's been an underpalooza in the CFL. That could be another reason why you're not too interested, which is understandable, but very
Yeah.
interesting. That's the one thing that I'm most interested to see because this has been one under after another. It's been good defense, but it's also been some lousy quarterback play, lousy offense at times, some weather issues too. Look at that Toronto Edmonton game. The weather was not cooperating at all for that game last week. So combination of things has led to really a boatload of unders. I think it was 3-1 under 2 weeks ago, 3-0 under last week. Just in the last 2 weeks alone, we're looking at 6 unders in 7 football games. So again, it's been a very under heavy league the last 2 weeks, and we're going to have to see if it continues to trend that way. So that's why, you know, to me, yeah, I really don't say that because everything's going under, everything is going to continue going under. You've still got to analyze and handicap each matchup as its own individual entity, which is why I like this over here because I do think it's going to be the game on this Week 6 slate that's going to have some more points to it, some more offense, some more big plays to it, especially from the Winnipeg side. So, but this is really the only game I could see it. I mean, BC, I don't trust their offense yet on the road with Lulay. Ottawa's offense has kind of gone down a little bit. I don't trust that game to go over. I certainly don't trust Saskatchewan Hamilton to go over. And the game we're going to wrap up with, I sure as hell don't trust Montreal's offense to push that game over the total.
Nobody does.
Montreal, nobody does. How about Calgary? They've only cashed unders in every single game they've played this season as well with a dominant defense. Hey, by the way, as we get into this game, I know Dave Dickinson came from the John Huffnagel tree. There could be a head coach in the future in the CFL coming from the Dave Dickinson tree, and his name is Devon Claybrooks. Okay, this guy has done a phenomenal job as the defensive coordinator for Calgary. He's been outstanding. I mean, the defense has actually gotten better the last couple of years for Calgary with Devon Claybrooks coordinating that group. He's a big guy. He's always got that big intensity on the sideline from him. He's done a great job. And this Calgary defense has been suffocating. Good luck now to Drew Willie and the Montreal Alouettes. And yes, I said Drew Willie because he has been confirmed as the quarterback. Remember, it was Jeff Matthews that played for Montreal 2 weeks ago before their bye week. Matthews was playing because Willie was hurt, and now Willie is playing because Matthews is hurt. So it's just a quarterback carousel of really guys that, to be honest, can't really play as number one quarterbacks. Let's not kid ourselves here. But now they're just going back to Drew Willie this time around because Matthews is the one hurt. Now we've got no line on this game, which is understandable. The news on Drew Willie starting just came out basically an hour ago before we came on the air. And Bo Levi Mitchell's status is up in the air. Remember, he left that game last week against Ottawa due to an injury, and Nick Arbuckle had to step in, the former Georgia State quarterback, and take over at under center for the Stampeders. So Mitchell did not practice at all today much. Most of the reps were being taken by Arbuckle, according to the Calgary scribes that I follow. And so Mitchell is very, very highly questionable for this game on Saturday night against Calgary. Well, will it matter? That's the question. I mean, Arbuckle to me looked okay at times. Obviously, he's still very, very green in terms of the CFL, but you're at home, you're playing Montreal. It's not the worst situation, obviously, in the world for the guy to step in if he has to be the one to start at quarterback for this game. So, if anything, I'll look under the total because I think they're going to be conservative with Arbuckle here. They know that if their defense just does what they've done all season long and shut down the opponent, like that was impressive. That was not some rinky-dink offense they shut down. Ottawa's got a decent quarterback and some good weapons. And Calgary just obliterated them defensively. It just suffocated, stymied, and stifled them throughout that entire football game. Impressive stuff. Good luck, Drew Willie, on the road trying to navigate against. Stands out like a sore thumb to me on this game. Maybe not involved from a side perspective, but definitely looking at an under here once the total comes out. Montreal Calgary, by the way, combined 7-0 to the under this season. Montreal's played 3 unders, no overs. Calgary 4 unders, no overs. So 7-0 combined under the total angle between Montreal and Calgary. Neither of these teams has cashed an over ticket yet this season, and I'd be stunned if they do this coming Saturday. Andrew, Alouettes and Stamps. Do the Alouettes have a snowball's chance in hell in this football game, even if Mitchell doesn't suit up for Calgary?
Yeah, I think this has been one of those weeks where it was almost, a good little, rest period for Bo Levi Mitchell, if you want to call it a good period for him to, whether that injury is that serious or not, it's a good week to have it because you're facing the absolutely terrible Montreal Alouettes. And, I think Arbuckle was good enough that even if, Bo Levi Mitchell couldn't play or couldn't finish out a whole game this upcoming week, it wouldn't really matter. I think that Montreal will not pick up a win. They will not even come close. And I think the under will be the play to stick with for this one. We'll probably get around the same as what we're seeing, 48 to 50 kind of number. I think it'll be a very low scoring game. Calgary, their biggest thing that they need to improve on, Ian, over the past several years after going down to Ottawa and going down to Toronto in these Grey Cups, were their defense. I mean, no, they are no longer getting walked all over anymore. It's not easy first downs against this Calgary team, that's for sure. And again, like you mentioned, that Ottawa Red Blacks team is a team to take seriously. They're a team that has weapons. We're not going to say that they're not a team to still take seriously. But again, Calgary is just way higher than anybody else right now. This is why I think that, even with Bo Levi Mitchell being a little bit of a question mark on this game, Arbuckle was there, still played pretty well. And Montreal is not going to really do too much against this Calgary team, no matter who's behind center. So I think that the under is the best play here, but honestly, we look Calgary still.
Yeah, Jonathan Manson in the chat. Thanks for the interaction, Jonathan. Great contributions in our chat during the show here, saying the total will probably be 48 or less in this game. Yeah, I would think so. I definitely would think so, especially with Calgary being really like what's their average? I think they're giving up 14 points per game on average. I don't think they've given up more than 14 points, and they haven't. They haven't given up more than 14 points in any game this season. And all of those offenses, I would probably rate all of them, every single one of them that they've faced so far, higher than this Montreal offense. That's for sure. So, yeah, is Montreal going to crack 10? Brian Watson, Montreal might not score 10. Yeah, they might not. They really, and it's because it's on the road too. They really might not score 10 points. They might not even find the end zone once. Hell, Ottawa didn't score a touchdown last week, and that was Calgary on the road. Now Montreal, unless Calgary is completely, just we can just glide onto the football field with our eyes closed and still completely shut. Unless they have that kind of mentality, maybe that sets in. But I don't think it will. Because you haven't seen Calgary have any sort of emotional or mental letdown yet, or just to take any team for granted. That could happen here with a team as bad as Montreal, but if they're even somewhat interested in this football game, Calgary, it's going to be hard pressed for Montreal to hit double digits in points. That's truly all there is to it. All right, let's wrap it up. We've got best bets to wrap up week 6. We're 5-5. We need a bounce back here. We wanted to stay above this 500 mark on the season and hopefully get back in the win column. I believe that Andrew and I have a consensus best bet, so hopefully that is going to end up being the tonic that we need to get back on track after a 0-2 week with the best bets last week. So, Andrew, I'll let you be the one to reveal it because we're both on the same page here with this one. Best bet for week 6.
Yeah, you know what, Ian? I'm actually going to switch things up. We had a consensus, and I think it's more enjoyable to have 2 different picks. So I'm going to roll with the Ottawa Red Blacks
great.
minus 6.5.
By all means, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I think that this Ottawa team will bounce back, and the BC win against Winnipeg, as good as their defense looked, as good as the offense finally sparked something, it's not going to be a match against this Red Blacks team. Don't let it fool you that Ottawa got smacked by Calgary. Do not let that fool you coming into this week. I think Ottawa is the far superior team to BC.
All right, there we go. Ottawa -6.5 against BC. That game taking place Friday night. That's Andrew's best bet. Mine is going to be Winnipeg. Pick 'em against the Toronto Argonauts. That game is the first one on Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Look, I like Matt Nichols' his demeanor after that loss. Saying, "Hey, I sucked." Especially in the second half, and yeah, it was tough. The defense wasn't helping him out a lot, but when I have a good quarterback, and I am now at the place in my CFL, I guess, viewing of watching this guy now the last couple of years. He is one of the best quarterbacks now in this league. I trust quarterbacks of that ilk to really step up their game after a bad performance, especially when they're vocal like that, to that extent, about having a bad performance. And I think you're going to see that from Matt Nichols on Saturday against the Toronto Argonauts, who, to me, are going to be a little bit hard pressed here defensively in this game. James Franklin, if Winnipeg puts up points, and I expect them to, can James Franklin match them point for point? Not totally sure he can at this stage of his CFL starting quarterback development. So I'm going to go with Winnipeg here at a pick 'em. All we got to do is win the game, cash our ticket, and I think they can get the job done. Winnipeg pick 'em against Toronto. That'll be my CFL Week 6 best bet. And that's going to wrap up our Week 6 edition of the CFL 3-Down Breakdown. Another great show. Thanks to everyone in the chat for tuning in. Jonathan Manson, Brian Watson, James Reno, a bunch of guys that are joining us here. We appreciate the great interaction, great opinions, great thoughts on the CFL Week 6 slate. Reminder, we will be back with you next Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, and every Tuesday throughout the CFL season right here on the CFL 3-Down Breakdown. For Andrew McGinnis, I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review. Enjoy Week 6 CFL action, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.